I'm Michael Strong, the host of When School's Not Working, also the founder of Expanse, a school where we're focused on developing your child's genius. And I'm here with my illustrious colleagues, Matt Barnes, Catherine Fraise, and Andrew Sachs, with our illustrious guest, Rob Huge. And we'll let Andrew introduce himself and then go around.
All right, thank you, Michael, and welcome, Rob. Andrew Sachs, I'm CEO of Noble Explorers. We're an online international learning community where learners collaborate with others from around the globe and learn the critical life hard skills and soft skills they need in life and work. And I'll only pass the baton to Matt.
Great, thank you very much. Matt Barnes. I work with parents at the Education Game. We try to make sure that parents understand all their options as well as how to advocate for their kids. In many cases, that means advocating away from a traditional educational model. So, Kath.
Yeah, hi, I'm Catherine Fraise. I'm founder of Workspace Education and 100 Roads. And we work with families and parents who want to create the education that their children need, and we help them create the models for that, as well as advise parents on how to create the best possible education plan for their children, and really create spaces where families can thrive outside the school system. All right, and take it away, Tori.
Hi, I'm Tori Gaddis. In addition to doing some work with Noble Explorers, I also have an app called Be Someone, which is an Instagram of project-based learning. I have a background in microschools and microschool revolution and helping people start microschools.
And you want to introduce Rob?
Yeah, so Rob and I met back when we were both founding Acton Academies, him in Chicago and me in Houston. And his is under the name Greenfield Academy, unless that's changed. But nope, that's it. And we had some great meetings in Austin over South by EDU and the Acton owners meeting. And we reconnected recently about When School's Not Working, and I'm really excited to have him on board to talk a lot about the Acton model and that microschool model and how it's different from the public school system. And I'll let Rob maybe give more of your own background there, maybe some more details.
Yeah, thanks, Tori. Michael, so just the way that you're supposed to pronounce my last name is Hugie. But all the males of our line never correct anybody when they say huge, and all of the females do. Yeah, I'm
family show.
Already in the gutter. All right. Didn't take long.
I was excited when I found out about your group, and certainly a pleasure to be invited and to be on. When school's not working, I think when is it working? Or is it working exactly as it was designed, right? I think there's so many open questions, but the piece that got me into K-12, it's something I stayed away from for a long time. I've been in education my entire career, but I've done professional education, continuing ed, licensing. I ran regionally accredited colleges, and I just stayed away from K-12 because to me it was too broken to fix from the inside out, and just this big behemoth sitting there. And then ended up down in Central America for 6 months with the family, and I have 4 kids. We were doing some homeschooling down there, just with the idea of coming back and being ready for school, to get them back into the neighborhood public school. And, we were trying out different homeschooling things like the drill and kill, which that's what you're supposed to do, right, at school. And so we were very much trying to do, school at home. In a pretty conventional way, but it turned out to be just a slog, right? For 2 hours every morning, just pounding your head against the wall. No, do your math facts now. Then the bribing came in of, well, if you finish, we can go to the pool. And then once we were done with that, like the stuff they would learn in the afternoons and be out, like my daughter, I think she was 6 at the time, she was memorizing the field guide for birds because she got really into birds, and she just verbatim start saying, oh, look, there's the whatever. I didn't even know what she was talking about, but it was I was like, wow. And the Spanish they got into, whatever it was that they found an interest in, they would go super deep, where we'd have to pull them away. And then the next morning, rinse and repeat, right? So it's nope, back to you need to learn your math. You need to learn or then I'd come up with a really cool idea that I liked, right? Hey, we're going to go see a volcano. let's make a slide presentation on volcanoes and research them, and like, let's pull teeth that way. And so finally we just decided to call a summer early, and we stopped doing that. But over that time, we were meeting a lot of families who were homeschooling while they were on the road. And to a kid that we met, they were just so mature for their age, and they knew, if they didn't know what they wanted, they knew a direction that they were going. They certainly weren't just a cog in some crazy homeschool wheel. And I mean, we did see all kinds, right? We saw the kind of like school at home, and then we saw the edge of the unschool, where it's like, no, I just don't want to be a parent. Nature supports, we're good. And so, you know, there's a lot of fun and messy ways to get around in it. But we came back. Actually, I didn't want to come back, so we took a vote in Panama City, and like, okay, who wants to just stay in Central America forever? Who wants to go home? It was a tie 3-3, which seemed like not enough to make the family stay in Central America. So we came back just in time for the teacher strike that year, which was awesome. Not. We got the kids back in school, and I immediately could tell, like, the way they carried themselves, how they communicated compared to their peers, which is so much greater. So just 6 months away, and they had just developed a whole different sense of who they were and how they fit into the world. And I was like super excited by that. So I went off and I started working on some college alternative ideas that I thought were pretty good. And that's when I really got into the self-directed learning and found out all the cool things going on there. And I came up with this great plan. And I started talking to high school juniors and seniors about it, and they didn't know what they wanted to do at all. And if they did know what they wanted to do, they didn't have any skills to be able to get them there. And so that was kind of depressing. And then I looked and saw what was happening with my kids, and, you know, that kind of a walk high, like they just kind of got sucked back into the machine, right? And they were back where they were, and we're back to having homework fights and all that good stuff. And so I was like, okay, maybe it's time to figure this out. And so that's when I started researching different school models and stuff, and couldn't find anything I liked. So I started making one from scratch. And then I ran across someone who said, Rob, what you're talking about doing sounds an awful lot like what's happening at Acton Academy in Texas. You should go check them out. I'm like, oh man, now I'm supposed to like bring something from Texas to the rest of the country. I don't, that generally doesn't work.
There's a reason they're a separate country, you know that?
On a separate power grid too. And obviously, long story short, I ended up starting Greenfields Academy in 2014. Micro school, we're looking for a bigger space COVID, right? So we're a little bit behind, but we're about 40 students right now. We're looking to build out to about 120 students with the next location. And it's really about, you know, helping kids develop the lifelong skills that they need to be the protagonist in their own stories. To be their own hero. And so to pretend that we know what the future holds for them is the most ridiculous thing out there. And to think that, you know, the way we've done things for 120 plus years are going to prepare them for something we can't even, the speed of change now is so fast. And to get them to be able to understand that and thrive with change and help direct change. I think the skills that they need now are just so different than before. But I'm rambling. You got me going.
No, look, we so agree. We all want to we all want to jump in. But I want to say that I love Acton Academy, right? But I want to know how it's really different from, you know, it's a micro school, so smaller school, right? But how is it actually really different from school? Like, what would you say would be the major distinguishers of an Acton Academy versus a school, public school?
Yeah, you know, there's over 200 Acton Academies now, and I think we were number 6 or something. And the piece about the model is it does allow each owner or head of school to kind of have a bit of a input and say on what happens. So they're all a little bit different, but at their core is the idea of a student-driven environment. And that starts different when you're younger to when you're older, right? It's not like you just throw them in and let them go, but they get to make choices about what they're going to do in a day, how they want their community to be, how they're going to interact with each other, how they're going to hold each other up to those standards. We don't have teachers, we have guides. And simply and that's just not a vernacular change. It's like the role is really different. And so there is no sage on the stage, right? So as soon as you take that out and you turn over the classroom management to the community, to the kids themselves, like, who do you want to be? How are you going to handle this? What are you going to do when this happens? And they develop all these skills. The amount of peer-to-peer interactions goes up exponentially. And that's where I think so much of the growth comes from, is that you learn so much about other people, you learn so much more about yourself, how to solve problems with others, how to collaborate, how to build things together. You learn the idea of, like, if you want to go fast, maybe you need to go alone, but if you want to go far, you're going to have to get a team together and figure out how to do something bigger. So in the mornings, we work on a student-directed core. We have a badging system where you need to show mastery in different areas, whether that's language arts or math. And so once you can show that, you earn, we have sashes and buttons, like, the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. And so we get to have little ceremonies. But you can go as fast as you want, or you can go as slow as you need to be able to make sure that you're mastering that skill. We teach very little fact-based stuff. We allow you to bring in a lot of your interests into your writing pieces and stuff. And so we have students who are working 4 and 5 years ahead in different areas, and we have some who are struggling to develop some different skills. But it's all very not asynchronous, but it's not linear, right? The whole idea that everybody can learn in the same way, at the same time, at the same pace, just isn't true. And we put in a lot of work to make that happen. So we can throw that away. So in the morning, we have that piece. In the afternoon, we do projects. So, we start businesses, we produce plays, we create rockets, try to do more real world, hands-on applied learning that they get excited about. We don't have grades. We go for about 5 to 6 weeks at a time. And at the end, there's a public exhibition of whatever's going on. So when they create their businesses, it's not like, oh, write down what kind of business you want to do and turn in your plan and we'll give you a grade on the plan. No, you're going to run a business for real money and you're going to sell real stuff. And so this year we had to take that online, but we had 700 shoppers come through or something online, and they sold like $14,000 worth of stuff. So it's doing real stuff and getting them that real experience. So
Matt
hopefully that'll be my
Barnes.
last long answer.
Yeah, Rob, love what you're describing. Yeah, gosh, lots of questions. The first one is, when you say your kids were weird, I would like you to talk more about that. What did you see in the kids at the traditional school? And why are you concerned about that? What you saw in the traditional school that pushed you into this environment now? Maybe saying it differently, what would you tell parents to look out for if their kids are in that normal category that all of us on this call are worried about?
Yeah, I think what you don't see is kids in their natural environment. And so, well, when you go to a conventional school, that's not a natural learning environment. And so I don't think we very often get to see what humans are actually capable of. Because, it's how do they survive this experience that we call school? And so I think the mindset, the amount of, I'd love to put all therapists out of business. because I feel like, you know, we build so much baggage up through this schooling experience, and it doesn't need to be that way.
Yeah.
Like all those coping skills, all those self-regulation skills, we actively work with those. You know, we do mindfulness every morning. We learn how to deal with our emotions. We do them in age-appropriate and funny ways. You know, for the younger kids, sometimes we talk about like your emotions are like farts. You know,
That must be very emotional.
Different. Yeah, and so you know, the things to look out for. Oh man, it's such a hard thing because if it seems like your kid is doing fine in conventional school, they're doing fine in conventional school.
They're not.
What is
They're
that?
not doing fine.
What does that even mean, right? Like there is no comparison thing. And so, but as consumers of education, for our children, which we aren't really either, because most of us end up having to send our kid to whatever school is nearest to our house. And that's the end of choice. So we don't even get a choice. And then the school tells us whether or not our kid is okay in their system, rather than us evaluating that system and seeing whether it's appropriate or not. So I think there's just so many problems.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody, I'll take that back. It's just so hard for me to get the idea of thriving into conventional school for anybody. I think your straight A valedictorian types. I was talking to one the other day. She's sending her kid to Greenfields. She's like, I nailed it. I nailed everything that traditional school was supposed to do. I ended up becoming a doctor, and you know, I aced all that. And she's like, but I'm miserable. Like, I don't know what living is. I don't know I never was asked, what do I want to do? Or what do I want to learn? I just chased that A, I chased that gold star, and they were all laid out for me. And I think that's a big problem that kids have coming out of college right now is like, okay, what's next? And it's like, there is no next.
So, you know, I always love, one of the great things about doing the show is every week we get a new story of somebody who saw that the emperor has no clothes, that school, in my eloquent terms, is bullshit. But most people are not with us. So what do you see, you had a beautiful personal experience and you took your kids and they're thriving seriously and they're learning seriously. What do you see as the transition process to get more people on this side of the paradigm?
I feel, unfortunately, right now, the transition process is mostly kind of what some of you guys talk about is like the kids who are struggling, right? Like, or school isn't working for my kid. If that's kind of the message that alternative education is like, hey, those kids work great with us, that's true. But like, it's saying like, wow, this kid works great when he's loved. Well, they all do. And I think getting that sense going is just such a big part. That golf is hard because first off, if your kid seems to be doing fine, you're ending up having to opt out of your neighborhood. At least in Chicago, that's the case. Chicago neighborhoods are like super tight, small knit things. So you're opting out of your neighborhood. You're going from free to not free, which is a big thing. And if your kid's struggling, you're also like having to like, there's an emotional process you have to go through with like, oh, did I screw them up? You know, do I now need to do something about it? And so it's that running from peace rather than running to something, where I think you think about how much ego people get into, like, I don't know, would be an example, like buying a car, right? And like the car is representative of what my values are, whether I'm a utilitarian who likes a big truck that I can drive through big snowbanks when I need to, or, you know, someone who needs the Lamborghini to get out there and show they're flashy. People don't have that sense necessarily about the school they send their kids to. Like there's just a lack of, you don't even know what questions to ask. Like go and Google, like, what questions should I ask about school? And it's like, what's the student to teacher ratio? What's their average test score increase? all these stuff. Like, I'm still upset as an adult that I don't get to take standardized tests because I'm really good at them. But it doesn't do me any good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amen.
So that's
I'm loving Rob. Rob, should we just pile on with him or what?
Well, so no, I think a couple of things. I like the running too, and Matt specializes actually in coaching parents on having a vision for their kid. I wanted to quote your thing about they do better when they're loved, and hello, they all do. That's a wonderful quotation. So is it kind of a cultural thing? Do you envision policy changes? Is it information? How do we get more parents running to something that's truly good for their kids instead of only running away when it's really bad?
It's hard because I've been trying to think about like sharing more stories, right? Of just like what kids are capable of. And we ran into a different problem with that because they're like, oh, this must just be a school for just gifted kids. My kid wouldn't belong there, right? And so it's like, no, like this is something for everybody. And then, but it's not quite for everybody because we aren't trained. Like we do have, we've had and have some kids who would be classified as on the spectrum. We certainly have ADHD, raise your hand if you got it. Like, I'm all in on that. But it's also like, take your neurotypical kids and give them a better learning environment and get out of their way, right? And just see what they can do. And I think our expectations in this country for children is just so low. I go on vacation down in Gulf Shores or something, and you get in the elevator and there's a sign in the elevator that says, if you are under 13, you must have a parent with you in the elevator. Like, what? Like, I could probably go have a child, right? But I can't use an elevator.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me jump in there. And I don't have a great answer for this either, Rob, but I do feel like the students are actually the best kind of quote unquote marketing for the program. I mean, I've got kids that are, again, my language is that normal is broken, so I want weird. And my kids are weird. They are very comfortable talking to adults. They have clarity about what they're doing. They have a ton of autonomy and a ton of leadership over their own learning. And that unfortunately is weird in American schools. So tell me some more stories about kids who are doing things that the rest of American schools would consider to be weird, abnormal. Give me some more stories about that, because again, I think that's the most powerful messaging that we can give families to understand what's possible. And also make sure you let us know what the ages of the kids that you're describing in your stories. I think mindset is a big part of it too. Like, so much of this stuff is hidden, right? The whole idea of character growth. But we had a 5-year-old who it was her first year. It was time for spring break. They go on spring break, and she's gotten used to the setting goals thing, right? Where it's like, what's my intention for the day? And so every day on vacation, she would set an intention for that day. And they were totally like fun child ones, right? She's like, I'm going to go on a hike with my dad and not ask him to carry me for any of it. But she had an intention of what she wanted to experience in that day, or how she wanted to grow in that day. And her older sister, she didn't hit one of them. And so she was upset. And her older sister was like on her, like, ha, 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 look at you. And mom stepped in and said, if you don't set any goals, then you never know where you're going. And it was like to watch a 5-year-old come in and help a family grow, right? To be seen as a full functioning part of the family, and that's like, children aren't mini adults, right? But they are full-fledged human beings with all the emotions that therein lie. And we just don't give them that experience. And so, you can see it and this is like, some of the kids who come to us have had really rough experiences, like some of the ones who have transferred in, right? Sure. And you can see it in the way that they walk, that they don't have any confidence. You can see it in their facial structure. Yeah. And then like 2 months in,
Like the way they're standing is different. The way they're holding their face is physically different. And it's just them finding themselves again and not being embarrassed by who they are. You know, and I know I'm not giving you any great stories right now, Matt, because I'm just like, I'm all fired up. I'll give you a good story, right? So apprenticeships is something that we ask students to do. That's part of the program. They need to identify kind of what area they want to work in. They need to write an email, make a phone call, set up the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
And so this one girl, she really wanted to go and work at the Field Museum. And she was 11 or 12. Field Museum, she's too young. The Field Museum rules don't allow her to go, and that's the response that she gets. And she is not someone who is going to, like, she's not a rule breaker at all. She is certainly a rule follower. She likes there to be good rules, though, but she just said that's not acceptable. And so she wrote them back, and, you know, she convinced them that even though she wasn't allowed to be there by their guidelines, that they should give her a chance. And she still works there during the summers now.
Yeah.
You know, she also just finished, she would be in 7th grade now, or 8th grade. I think she would be, we don't have grade levels either. So whenever anyone asks me, I get confused. But she's what we call an explorer, which is actually, now I take that back. We would call her a Voyager, even though, which is our high school level program, even though she's of middle school age, she'd finished all the stuff. So you just keep moving and go on.
Yeah. So let me pause you for a second, if you don't mind. I mean, so for the parents that might be listening, to understand the importance of what this young lady did when she got a no answer, she actually had enough courage and enough confidence to say, I'm going to negotiate, right? And negotiation is something that is not allowed in a typical educational structure, right? There are policies, there are rules, and they apply to everyone, and there's no question about it. So, but in the real world, outside of school, we negotiate all the time, right? At least those that are high functioning adults do. And so for the parents that might be hearing this, you've got a kid who's, 11, 12 years old, who is thinking and operating like a high functioning adult already. Imagine what that looks like as she moves forward. That's the kind of story that, if we unpack the importance of it, I think it does start to give parents a pause, because you won't see that in traditional educational structure.
Yeah, and I think, Matt, one of the things that I didn't say about the Acton model is outside of 3 main rules, right? So outside of, you can't physically or emotionally hurt somebody else, you can't destroy somebody else's property, and you can't intentionally distract somebody from their learning. The young people come up with all the rules, and they enforce all the rules. And so there's constant negotiation around that, like, well, that rule we made doesn't make any sense. Okay, well, let's figure out how that works. And so it's well beyond, because conventional school, you learn how to be a cog. Whether
you're rewarded for being a cog, and you are actually actively punished for being yourself. That's the interesting dynamic there. Go on. Sorry.
Yeah. And so I think one of the big things about conventional school is there's a mindset that's being taught that is, it's unspoken, right? It's not stated. It's never going to show up in one of your learning outcomes that's written for that course. But it is like, sit down and shut up and talk when spoken to. And, certain people are just better than others. And if you're not one of those people, well, then you're never going to get there. And that's just not life, man.
Yeah. I want to dig into the human development, the social skills, the character stuff in a minute. But first, just in marketing, when you talk about, you see the change in children's faces. I've always thought that what I need to do above all in marketing is show the kids' articulate, confident self grow year after year. And then conversely, if we could get snapshots of kids in regular school where the great, it's horrible, but the crushing of the soul that occurs. So I think we all need to do marketing like that. Ultimately, we need time lapse of kids in self-directed programs blossoming, and it's horrible. The kids, dead flatlining in regular programs. Yeah. The question I wanted to ask is, when I imagine one of my frustrations, and one of the reasons I love this group, is we don't believe in school anymore, but the mainstream does. And so I think of Gates Foundation. So Gates hears, oh, Rob says they need to set intentions. Beautiful story about the 5-year-old setting intentions. So we'll have a curriculum in which all kids set intentions in the schools. And somehow, you're nodding, somehow I don't think it's going to have the same impact. So why is it that people can't take these great ideas that we're implementing all over outside the system and just implement them in the system? Why is it not going to work?
Yeah, my belief is that conventional school isn't broken for a lack of money and really smart people trying to make it better. It's the structure. It's the structure that's in it. It's the break them down by years, break them down by subject matter, make them start and stop every 50 minutes, give them no purpose for what they're learning. Well, that doesn't really fall into structure. It's just there. But within those structures, you can't change much that's going to be sticky. I think you can look for a lot. There's some amazing ed tech that's sitting on the shelf because they're like, we just found this way that people learn so much faster and so much deeper, and it's cheap and it's going to be awesome. And they never went and talked to a school district, right? So because they're like, this is going to be the best thing. And then they go and try to sell it to a school district, and they're like, how would I even use this? Like, which class would I put it in? Who would teach it? It's all cut into these like very square holes, if you can say that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Rob,
it's got to fit into what I already got.
I love that answer, because I do think one of the biggest problems we have worldwide, actually, in all different systems, is everything is just so fragmented. And, all these people are trying to fix it, but they're fixing little fragments and they're not really getting at the whole of the system. And what I love about Acton Academy is you've got these learner-driven communities, these little holes working together. And everything is so meaningful, and everybody knows each other, and they're all working together to make this thing work. And I think that delivers so much agency. So you are going to get a child that's had all this experience working with other people and making the decisions that communities have to make on a day-to-day basis. It's a very powerful learning model.
Agreed.
Matt.
Yeah, Kath, I could not agree more, but we're 30 minutes in, and Rob, it's time to take the gloves off, dude. All right,
bring it.
Gloves are coming off, right? All right, so again, now I love what you're doing. I love the model, but this is not for every parent, not for every family. So you already mentioned kids that are kind of different learners. Talk to me about some of the other practical barriers for families to engage in Acton, cost, family structure, et cetera. Help me understand more about that, or maybe the expectations that are placed upon families. Yeah,
I can give you, over the years, I've kind of found 4 groups who our model doesn't work great for, right? One is if your biochemistry makes it very hard to do teamwork. A lot of our projects are team-based. If having to work with others is something that is a trigger for the way that you're wired, it's going to be a very long road. Executive functioning. If you don't have, it's not if you don't have, but if again, your biochemistry is not letting you develop executive functioning skills, in a progressing rate, it can be very hard, because you are asked, and you're not just asked, but you're given the opportunity to develop your executive functioning skills around self-regulation, organization, setting goals, holding yourself accountable, holding others accountable, creating your own schedule, to the point when you're in the high school program, it's really creating pretty much your whole senior year of what you're going to be doing. There's a lot of executive functioning that if you're someone who can't get there, and it's not that you're not there yet, because we don't expect anyone to be there yet, right? But if it's just something that your biochemistry isn't letting you do it, that has proven to be a problem. The other 2 are different. One is if you don't want to be there, there's nothing we can do, right? Sure. We have not created a model that has adults chasing kids around, making sure that they're at their desk doing their work.
Right.
That's not what we believe to be successful. So if you weren't part of the decision to come and you don't want to be there for whatever reason, we really don't have a way to help those kids. Those are few and far between. Even our high schoolers are like super excited and like practically skip to school. So we don't have much of that. And the last one is the family piece, where if you as parents don't buy into that every child is a genius who's born with the potential to change the world, it becomes very disjointed for the child.
Yeah.
Where at school during the day, I'm someone who can exercise leadership. I can create change in my community. I can stand up to things that don't seem right and make a change. I have powers I'm believed in. And then if you go home and it's like the kind of authoritarian parenting style, it'll work for a while and then it doesn't.
Yeah, it's interesting. On that last point, I have heard from parents who believe in what Acton is trying to do, what we all advocate for, and they have that dynamic at home. And it's almost the reverse. The kid goes to school and now they have to completely conform themselves to a model that doesn't want to hear from the child. I mean, it's a similar struggle for the kid of being kind of schizophrenic, depending on the model that the life that they're in.
Just on that one really quick, Matt.
Yeah.
One of the saddest pieces for me was when I was first starting the school and we were interviewing families, and to hear how many young people kind of live that life of quiet desperation of like, I'm in this system that doesn't make any sense. I don't know why we're here. My parents won't back me up on it being stupid. And like just emotionally crushing. And the parents, I mean, it's a house of cards, right? If you tell your kid, yeah, you're right, this school you're going to, it doesn't make any sense, like then that whole thing unwinds. And so you end up with a broken parent-child relationship, and you end up with a kid who just ends up feeling like the world is supposed to be this way too. Like, now I'm going to accept this for the rest of my life because this is kind of like, this is my lot. Yeah.
You didn't mention cost.
Cost can be a factor. We do financial aid. This year we started more fundraising too to help out with that. And I know it depends on the community, but generally what are we talking in terms of maybe a range of costs that a family might have to look at? This range is hard to even probably comprehend. It's probably like a 4 to 5-fold range. Depending on not only community, but style of that school. Without getting too deep into the inner workings of the Acton community, there's a couple different mindsets of it, and some of them are very much of like, "Hey, we are going to be hard-nosed Navy SEAL, like get this done, and we're going to do amazing stuff as a team, and we're just going to get it done."
Yep.
Which works great for a bunch of schools, and then there's some other schools that are more big family. Right, where it's like, hey, you come in, and if you're having a hard time figuring out how to, like, we're going to love you up to the expectation.
Got it. So every Acton school, it's not like a franchise where every McDonald's you get the exact same thing. Every Acton school, you really need to understand what they are about. Can I ask another question, Michael?
Go for it.
Yeah. So I don't know, some months ago, I signed up for the Acton. They have a website that says, are you interested? Give us your information. Help us understand how a group of families that might be interested in exploring this, whether they're in Chicago or Austin or other community, how do they form something like this?
Yeah, so
or join something that's existing.
Yeah, so if there's not one in your area, like if there is one near you, go talk to the owner, the founder there. And oftentimes they're just excited and will figure out a way to incorporate you into what's going on. The value of being like a community-based micro school is there's lots of different ways to I need to think of a good phrase, because skin a cat just doesn't sound very nice, or, you know, there's a lot of different ways to get this done, right? Yeah. And so I go and talk to them. But if there isn't a school around you, you can contact Acton through their website and go through the process of being accepted to open your own Acton. Right now, I don't know the actual numbers right now, but they get lots of applications around that, and trying to grow in a way that allows rapid growth, but still make sure the right people are in the founding group, right? Yeah. So if you're not going to do a franchise and tell people exactly how to do it, then you need to make sure that you get more of the people who are going to be able to do it successfully on their own, who are also true believers. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you end up with no brand. You end up with no name, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Tori, do you have any thoughts about the financial kind of range that people would be looking at for Acton?
So it's like Rob said, it could be a pretty large range. I've heard as high as like 30K in Washington, D.C., very high real estate, some of that. But I would say the typical Acton is probably about 10K. We started at 3K in Houston, but that was unsustainable, and it has ramped up since then. I'm going to say typically somewhere in the 5 to 10K range. It's one of those issues where when it's really small getting off the ground and you only have very few kids, you really want it to be closer to 10 or 15. Right. Once you get north of 50 kids, you can really ramp your tuition down potentially, especially if you can get to 100 kids, which some Actons have done. And then you've got a lot more financial flexibility, because the overhead does not scale with the number of students.
It's a very heavy fixed cost business.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So Rob, I've mostly created schools in Austin and San Francisco Bay Area, which are kind of startup hubs, cultural creative hubs. I used to live in Chicago and love Chicago, and I don't think of Chicago quite in that sense. So what's the demographic in Chicago that's ready for this? Can you give us any sense for which parents are ready?
We get a lot of independents, people who have started their own business, or people who, we get kind of the gambit, but we don't have anyone who's just kind of in a mid-management type job who is kind of happy with the machine, right? It's people who have kind of had that moment where they see clearly that, like, either my schooling didn't prepare me for the world as it is, or I can see that your schooling is not going to prepare you for the world as it's becoming. And a lot of those. And I'd say we've probably 40% of our kids are, like, quote unquote above grade level-ish, right? It's pretty diverse learning piece, but they all get in there. But from a family standpoint, it's a lot of kind of independence. So we've got real estate people, doctors, lawyers, your usual kind of private school folk, and then artists, and people from more of a creative mindset. But they're all kind of, they see the world in their own way and don't feel wed to what everybody else is doing. And in Chicago, private school is very much seen as either an elitist thing or a religious thing, and there's no other way it will be seen.
Mm-hmm. You know, the pattern I see too is entrepreneurs and creative professionals disproportionately represented. And I think they're right in fields where they have to make it on their own. They have to create value. It's not jumping through hoops. Just data on that, I saw a survey by freelancers where 95% of freelancers believe skills are more important than credentials. And I think we're all there. But yeah, if you have to prove yourself by getting, delivering value every time, school is irrelevant, university is irrelevant.
Well, I think to go to that university thing, like having been in higher ed, I think higher ed's more broke than K-12, if that's possible. It's just easier to kind of cherry pick your way through, and you come out with a big fat credential. Mm-hmm. Right. So it's like, hey, I just need that place. What's the stat? 94% of provosts think they're doing a great job preparing their students for their next stage of life, and 9% of employers do. And for that, you get to pay $200,000
if you're lucky.
It's like the game show from hell.
if you're lucky.
So Matt, you have another question now?
Yeah, I do. Rob, again, love the conversation tonight. Again, going to continue to, pressure test and, what Acton's doing. In my experience, there are some groups that are, well, we've already mentioned it. There's kind of a religious group that is looking for different educational model. There's the creatives, the, folks who've kind of woken up to realities of school. But then there's some groups like African-American families, sometimes Latino communities that feel like they have just been dismissed for generations in some cases. And they're looking for something else. Oftentimes, though, of course, they may not have the financial resources. Can you give me a sense of what you're seeing from African-American families, particularly families with boys that are saying, this traditional school is not only not working, but it's actually actively injuring my boy. Do you have any experience with that? Do you have any sense of how that's
I'd say
playing out?
like the piece that I think is hard on my end is that so many of those families, they seem to be wed to a belief that it's because the school I have is bad. And we get too many of people who moved into Chicago to be in the best neighborhood school.
Right.
And then find out like, oh, this is the best that there is. And then they realize like that it's broken. And right. I feel like people coming from less well-off neighborhoods feel that it's more about their neighborhood school, not the system. Yeah. And that it's everybody else is getting a better version of the system. And I think that's true. Why you see like money more correlated with test scores and other things, because it's not the system. It's what those families augment the system with.
That's right. That's right. And yes, so for you're saying, so for a lot of families, they're looking across town and seeing a quote unquote better school and saying, why can't we have that? But the families in the know are saying that better school isn't better. It just may have nicer walls or nicer track or nicer football stadium. But what's happening inside is not any better in preparing a kid for adult life. Yeah, that's a real good point. And I think if we could figure out how to communicate differently or help those families understand.
Yeah, and maybe I'll get in some hot water here because sometimes I haven't been around people very often during this. Like this is like weird, right?
Jump in the hot water. Jump in.
No, I think all the focus and money and effort we put into the achievement gap is misplaced. Because it is about like getting people from here to here when we should be aiming for here. And so like, it reminds me of what happened in Africa when phone lines came through. They're like, phone lines, let's just do cell towers. That's just ridiculous.
Why do I need that?
And just leapfrog the technology, right? And I feel like as long as we're trying to get everybody up to mediocre, we're never going to leapfrog into what it could be for everybody. And how to do that at a bigger scale, I think, is a challenging piece. And that money piece it's a real thing, right?
So one of the things that that we ran across in Nobel was we would run our program in schools that were disadvantaged, and those kids actually did better than the kids in the traditionally good schools, and it was really. I believe it was because they were already recognized that the system they were in was broken. They were willing to put their energy into something new. They weren't wed to what was being placed in front of them. They understood that this was not the right pathway forward and were willing to make that leap. Do you think that if you look at the pattern of innovative schools, right, you see them, right, a lot in places that are totally broken, where people are willing to toss out what you've got because it's just such an utter failure. Is there any pathway to getting that threshold up so that it's not just utter failure that means that the public school system are willing to change?
And I think you got to figure out what utter failure is. I was reading some stats yesterday, getting ready for our talk today, and like 70 to 80% of parents believe that their oldest child is having a good school experience. And less than 50%, yeah, go ask the kids. And less than 50% of the general public thinks that the education system is working well. And so I think it's not just about parents. We need to get like a broader piece of like, at what point do we find, like in Chicago, 40% of high school students are clinically depressed in any given year.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to stop pathologizing them and start pathologizing the system.
So, so suicide rates are up. You name every bad outcome there is. At what point do we say stop?
Right.
Like this is like it's broken. Now. Sorry, Michael.
So no, I have I don't know if you guys will buy into it, but happy to create a collaboration here. So I don't know what you've heard about this, Rob, but there's in Illinois, there's an Empower Illinois tuition tax credit program where my understanding is eligible schools get $13,000 per pupil without an IEP and $26,000 with an IEP. And the reason I'm connected to this a little bit is new collar job training. So, the schools and universities have completely failed with respect to coding, UX, UI design, digital marketing, video and so forth. And what is to prevent you, in theory, you're accredited and everything, couldn't you help poor families, low-income families provide, obtain those funds to use your school?
Yeah, to what Andrew was saying, like the people who come who have already kind of seen like there is no purpose, the real question is, what is the purpose of school, right? And a lot of people from the underserved areas, like the answer is nothing. And it's obvious. And so I'm going to check out. I think this type of purpose-based learning would be super powerful in those communities, and find a way to get some money for it. I would love to. It's been on my longer-term plan of make enough money off of the north side and take it to the south.
Let me interrupt there because this is not a situation that is, in my view, money dependent. You have to have a parent who 100% believes that this is the right approach and is willing to adjust their behavior at home. Because as you mentioned earlier, Rob, a kid who goes to school and has a certain type of experience is given freedom and autonomy and encouraged to risk, and then goes home and has the exact opposite experience. That kid is going to unwind in your school, right? He won't work. And I've seen that 100 times. So it's not fundamentally a cost issue. It is really an alignment issue of the family with the vision that Acton's talking about, that all of us on this call are talking about. So I want to also make sure that we don't get in a position where we're like, okay, let's drop the price down to zero and assume that somehow it's going to work, because it won't. I've been in charter schools that have said similar things, and then they have not done anything to be clear with parents of what's expected and what's going to happen at home to make this work, et cetera. So
it begs the same question that you've been asking, right? Of like, how do we get parents on board to see that this is the better way, or that there's any better way, or that what's happening to their students is like bad to their kids.
That's right.
So I completely agree with you, Matt. At the same time, I would expect with your business model, low-income parents, it's hard for you to serve all low-income parents. So in some ways, one of the reasons I'm fascinated by, we'll call it this pile of money in Illinois, there's different pile of money in Florida, different states are experimenting with this, is how can we leverage the fact that there is a little bit more flexibility around funding in certain states. And maybe, $26,000 for every Black boy with an IEP in Chicago, we could fund Matt Barnes to be preaching on the streets. I'm playing with it, but how do we get more kids going in the right direction, and how do we create the cultural pipeline, the educational pipeline, the informational pipeline? I know there are a whole bunch of moving parts, so it's not easy. Totally get that.
Yeah.
But otherwise, what happens is, the same kids will go into plumbing. Have always gone into plumbing. The same kids, raised in homes where they do coding will go into coding. And so a lot of this for me gets into social mobility. The existing system's broken. I definitely I see what we're doing as the key accelerator for social mobility, But if poor families can't afford it, it's tough for us to fulfill that promise.
Yeah, no question. That's what I was getting at, this question about the barriers, and finances is a barrier. But the fourth point that he made about family buy-in, I would argue that that is the biggest barrier, and not something that money can actually fix. My sense of what fixes that is giving parents a legitimate choice. And I'm not talking about school choice, the choice of, am I going to adjust my entire life in order to make sure my kid has the shot that I want? And every parent I've ever met wants the same thing for their kid. It's just a question of, do they realize what their school is not going to be able to give them? Usually the answer is no. They assume that the school is going to be the solution, when in fact, in my experience, it's not the solution 80-90% of the time. So
this may be a topic for another day, because I know we're running out of time, but I was just thinking, like, so much of parenting comes from a fear-based place, right? That I'm going to mess my kid up.
That's right. Or
I'm not going to get the right thing for them. How much of that is just a response to conventional school, where the concern is, my kid's not going to get good grades. My kid's going to be a behavioral problem. My kid's and I need to make sure that doesn't happen. So it's almost like your reaction to that becomes the way you make decisions, because right now the big gold star for so many people, so many parents in this country is like, I got my kid into a great college and I'm done.
Now what?
No, I'm done. Now they move out of the house and I get to go back to having a life.
No, wait, you have to pay the bill. Never mind. details.
Yeah,
Rob,
we've talked about that a lot, Rob, and I think part of what we're trying to do here is the cultural transition. We're trying to validate. I think part of it is a cultural transformation where, ultimately, I love Blake Bowles. Why are your kids still in school? But go ahead, Matt. I'll give you the last word, and we'll wrap it up.
Yes, I actually interviewed him just 2 weeks ago. He's my daughter is following his game plan. So, okay. I'm working with some families that are tinkering around with forming their own micro school. Why should they join Acton versus build their own?
It's the same thing. I talk to people who are thinking about doing homeschooling. Like, if you want to come up with your whole plan of how you're going to do the homeschooling and all the research behind it and everything else, and that's the type of person you are, and you have that amount of time to devote, great, go for it. But there's a system that already works, and a system that, if it aligns with your values, why wouldn't you get that leg up and be part of a community that is out there to support you? I think the biggest value we get from the community now, and it's one that's been growing over time, is the ability to talk to everybody else in that community. So we've got open forums and networks where people, the owners have a forum where they ask each other all kinds of questions and stuff comes out. The guides have a separate forum where they can ask each other questions. And so being, if not surrounded by, having access to like-minded people who are doing the same thing just makes it so much easier.
Yeah, I'll echo that. There's just thousands and thousands of hours that have gone into developing the Acton model and refining it, and based on knowledge of the Montessori method. I mean, they factored everything in, and then there's the network on top of that. So even when there's not an official thing in the knowledge base to tell you how to do something, you can just ask a question, you'll get 10 answers, and then you get all access to the wisdom of the network. And it's huge when you're running a micro school, because there are 10,000 things. Rob will probably say there's 20,000 things that can go wrong in a micro school on a daily basis, right? And having that wisdom and knowing what to do is huge.
Yeah, I want to second that and say that it's very intelligently put together. You'd be hard pressed, and I've looked, trust me, to find something that has been so well put together in all different aspects and being very, very carefully tested. And the founder worked at the University of Texas in teaching entrepreneurship, and he's very much into accountability and making sure all the systems are absolutely spot on. And the founders have been at it for, I don't know, Rob, maybe at least 10 years now, and they're very on top of their owners forum, giving feedback all the time and keeping everybody informed, and then also creating a great very deep support network. So you can get all the resources that you need, but also you can be assured that, you know, the community that you put your child in is in really, really good hands. And they've been going for a long time. And I think it's a very great thing to be a part of.
Yeah, and Matt, just one other quick thing on that. A number of the people don't have intentions of making them into schools, right? Where it's really about us and a couple other families, or in some cases, it's just my family. But having that system and having that support there to be able to do it is helpful. We do the Chicago Children's Business Fair every year. And the last 2 years, we've started inviting neighborhood Actons to come in and be part of that. And so I think you're going to see more of that, where you're just going to have a larger group of people to interact with.
Thanks, helpful.
So thank you so much, Rob, for joining us this evening. And definitely want to stay connected, and please stay connected with our communities. Michael Strong with When School's Not Working, and thanks everybody for caring about thriving and vitality of your children. May they all thrive as soon as possible. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, thank you guys.